right. First, thank you all for having me. It's like quite amazing to be in the company by one of the more well-known fintechs, number 26, and one of a more interesting one for bigger companies, Penta, which we already at Kontist also had a few encounters with. So my talk is about presenting product design, which I hope is still relevant for all of you who are not designers or don't work on products. Yeah, so I want to give a little bit of an introduction about myself first. This is me a couple of years ago. And I'm showing this picture for two reasons. One, of course, because it's very cute. Second of all, it shows me on like my first custom-built drum set, which was, as you can see, very expensive and good. And yeah, the second reason is because music and got me into graphic design. So I started out playing in a band, and I had to design, of course, the logo because I was the one who downloaded like the illegal cracked version of Photoshop a couple of years ago. And I started doing banners, I started doing logo design with like splatter brushes, so what like every pop punk cover band looked like in 2004 or something. And afterwards, I started getting into more code. So like the first encounter I had was at like with our MySpace site, and I don't know if you remember, but at like the very old days, at MySpace, you could copy and paste HTML and CSS into like the About Us section or something, and then it starts the page and was like super messy, and I had no idea what I was doing. And from there, I started to learn a lot more about it, like started doing more websites, and then started on working on digital products. So where I'm working on now is Kontist, where I'm leading the design team, which sounds big, but it's only one person right now, so which is also not a designer, it's our illustrator, but we're looking for more people, more on that later as well. Kontist you might not know because it's not as big as number 26, for example. It's a bank account, but specifically tailored for freelancers. So it might be interesting for some of you. If I may ask, like, who is working as a freelancer in, like, yeah, who works as a freelancer? So a couple of people. All right. I hope you're not too happy with your bank account right now. And I hope you're not using number 26 business. So what Kontist does is you can categorize your income and and your outgoing expenses, and you can select a category, and based on that we can calculate how much you have to pay in income tax and how much you have to pay in VAT. I joined the company because I was working as a freelancer 1.5 years. And when you write an invoice to someone, you see like the big number, which has like the income tax on it, and then you charge VAT on top of it. So all the time as a freelancer, you see like big numbers coming into your account, and like you see your accounts balance, and you think like, this is so many, like I can easily afford this, or I can easily afford that. And then 1 year later, you get like a nice letter from the Finanzamt, and they write about something which is, probably no one likes that word. It's, but it's also like the most German word ever. It's nachträgliche Steuervorauszahlung, which means you have to pay the taxes which you haven't paid, and in addition to that, they adjust the taxes, so you have to pay even more for what you didn't pay. So it's very complicated. We're trying to solve that. And what I'm doing there is day by day, I work on digital products and websites like most of you people do. Like what I'm showing is like our marketing website, for example, where I also do the front end. Then I have like the Android app and iOS and all that kind of stuff. So if you're working on digital products in the design space nowadays, you probably are familiar with like the two tools I'm showing. The one is Sketch, and the other one is Abstract, which is like version control for design files. If you haven't heard about that, check it out. It's really, really good. So most of the time, or like most of the days, I either spend in those tools or I spend with code. But the fun thing is, because I'm the only designer, I have to work on a couple of other things, like physical products, for example. So that's our credit card, which I designed, which haven't turned out as much, as I would like it to, but you never get samples with credit cards, so you just pick a color, hope it's the right one, and then you see it the first time when people actually get it. So yeah, that was fun. This, yeah, I mean it's at least purple, and like with CMYK colors, all you see on your computer monitor is blue, and you think, I really hope to God it's not going to be blue when it's printed. And the other thing we did is we did a poster campaign at an U-Bahn station at Rosenthaler Platz, which was like the first big billboard posters I ever designed, which was also a really, really interesting project. When I worked on those projects, I learned a big thing. With digital design, we too often see a PNG as a finished design. And I want to explain that a little bit. So if you have a traditional print process, some of you might still work with print stuff. You start with an InDesign file, you export it as a PDF, which is like the production asset you send to a printer, and then in the end, you have a printed product. And when you present it, what you normally do is you put that printed product in your portfolio. And one example of that is a branding project by a Norwegian design agency, and you can see there what they do is they present the work in context. So you have like the big type on a storefront, and they take photos of everything, or you have the posters like kind of there in the background, and you really see them in context. So you get a feeling where the designs they did actually hang in production and how they are applied. If you look at a digital design process nowadays, it's like you start in Sketch or Figma or whatever, then you export them as PNG to kind of get your design feedback. You probably write design documentation, or you use a handoff tool like Zeppelin to get it to developers. And then in the end, you have them implemented. So the job normally the printer does, your developers do. So in the end, you have a product which behaves and actually works and you can interact with and all that kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes you don't export it as flat files and you do a prototype. That's like a little bit different. But what most people do in this design process is they take the exported flat files and they just upload it to Dribbble, or put it in their portfolio or share it or whatever. Which is a shame because it's missing out on two very important things. Like, you don't talk about design documentation, you don't show the implemented designs. So what I want to encourage is like 3 different points. I want to walk you through kind of how one can do better and build a more immersive product design portfolio. The first thing I want to talk about is that digital software is a moving and living system. You have like all this interaction in an app. You have videos, you have stuff that scrolls. So an example of that, which is actually by the same design agency, is what they do is they show the work they do in context. So they have Instagram ads and they show you how they actually show up in Instagram, like with the icons around it, with the likes, and how they are animated and how they appear. Same as they do for websites. So they have a little animated GIF or like a video, and you can see kind of how the interaction on the page is, because imagine this design as just one static file, it wouldn't do it justice. Second of all, we don't design just for screens anymore. So we live in an age where it's not Photoshop and you design a screen by screen basis and they are not connected, and then you hand them to developers. So we live in an age where you have 2 different concepts which are like the same concept and different tools which are kind of made for each other. So you have front-end frameworks like React on the one side, and you have Sketch symbols, for example, on the other side. So you can easily bridge the gap between what is in component in code and what is like a symbol in Sketch. So one example I want to show you of that is from Victor, who worked at Outlook. And what he does in his portfolio is really interesting because he shows it first also in just an iOS device or like with iOS elements, but then he also shows how he structured it and how in the end he builds bigger components out of smaller components, and you can clearly see his thinking behind how he designed and how he structured the app. Another example, you probably have seen some of these. It's like those crazy sketch runner flows where someone designs a complete website in like 2 seconds. It's really, really awesome because it shows you how powerful kind of like a design system or just like a symbol or component-based architecture can work with like all the overrides and stuff. And so this is like one dribble shot he posted, which I found quite awesome. The other thing which he posted is actually the design documentation of the components he posted. So there you can clearly see how what he shows is the whole process from like back to forth. And you're not missing out on the actual work someone did. And you can even take this further by just breaking it down to not even platform-specific UI components like those charts, or just like how numbers are structured, how graphs work, like kind of dialogues in an app. I encourage you to go to all the, I'm gonna post like my slides online afterwards, so if you're interested, definitely check out those portfolios because they're really, really outstanding in the way they showcase. Third point I want to talk about is we need to better sell the work we do. So Josh, who is an engineering lead on material design at Google, said, every UI refresh ever boosts a cleaner new design. We need to get better at describing the work we do. So I often see that as well, like nobody puts the effort into even writing release notes and nobody talks about their process. Intercom is a good example who actually do that, so there you can really see how they get from A to B, and they talk about user research, they talk about different versions they tested. So oftentimes when we present design, what we want to do is we want to show people all the thinking on like all the work we actually put in it, and if we put out only a static screen, like one version of a design, we are missing out on the opportunity to educate people of like all the thinking which goes in design. I actually had a conversation with a few people on Twitter, like yesterday, I think, where I wrote, who can explain to me what like design thinking means? I give 10 euros. And of course, a lot of people replied to that. And the lesson I learned is that in my position right now in like a startup environment, I'm really biased by people around me who work in a product environment and who already know that design is kind of an integrated thing in a product process. What you often have to do when you work at an agency, and what I had to do when I was working in advertising as well, is that you have to kind of sell people the idea of design being more than aesthetics, being more than people who make things pretty. So I have a few examples of people who do a really good job at just presenting all the stages in the design process. This one is by Eli, who's a freelance designer, I think, from New York. And what he does is his portfolio is one giant piece of just one project he's presenting. But what he does is really interesting. So he starts by showing just case studies and research and wireframes, and this is actually just one giant image on his portfolio. So it goes like this. And you can see like all the framer prototypes he did, like Hangout conversations he has, like prototype, and you really understand just from seeing this whole body of work what actually goes into designing a digital product. Another really good example is building SoundCloud, which is a portfolio project from Michael. You should also really check this out. So it's like a good deep dive of, hey, here's the old version, what didn't work, what had to be improved, and then the new version, so you can really understand where he's coming from and why he did the decision he made. So what I want to get to with all of that is, we as designers have the responsibility to kind of educate people on the meaning of design. And if we stick to posting like one screen design shots on Dribbble, where it's just about, hey, here's like the thing I did in 5 minutes, and you write product designer in your bio, and people come to your site and view it as your portfolio, what they get is the impression of, this is like a guy who makes things nice. And I had the experience with, when I was freelancing, that startups came to me and said like, hey, we're looking for a designer, we spend all of our money on engineers, and like our app is working, but it looks like crap, can you come and make it pretty? And I think what we all want to do is like fight against that opinion, or like, yeah, that idea that people have that design is something you can just like paint a layer on stuff and it looks nice, which you all know is not the case. So sometimes just taking a step back and thinking about, do I have the time and effort to like describe my process, really show off all the thinking I did to kind of benefit the whole design community, is better than just showing off or like trying to get as many followers as possible, because it might benefit yourself, but it harms the overall reputation of design in a sense. If you do decide to do a product design portfolio, still like talk about your process, share a lot. I know it's really, really hard because I tried to do a few portfolio pieces where you want to talk about your process, you want to share like early wireframes, and then remember, like, I never did photos, I like never documented everything, so all I have is like kind of the final results. So just like when you're working, try to just take photos of stuff, like of user interviews, and even if you don't think you're ever gonna need them, you might be lucky or happy when you have them in the end. Yeah, so that's what about it. As I said earlier, I'm still like, mostly the only designer in our company, and if you think it's interesting what we are doing, we are looking for a visual designer and of course JavaScript developers, because everyone is looking for JavaScript developers. So if you think it's interesting what we are building and you want to help freelancers just not get nachträgliche Steuervorauszahlungen, talk to me afterwards, and those are links where you can find me on the internet. Thank you.